Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jackie Medcalf. I'm a former Highlands resident, and I'm the founder and executive director of Texas Health and Environment Alliance. We are here today to announce the cancer cluster finding in Harris County that encompasses 250 square miles of the San Jacinto River's floodplain. Texas Health and Environment Alliance, along with area residents, requested this study from Texas Department of State Health Services in February of 2024. We worked closely with the agency to define the parameters of the study, which covered 65 census tracts and looked at 22 types of cancer in people of all ages and 7 childhood cancers. Of the 29 cancer types examined, they found unusual patterns of leukemia, lymphoma, cervix, lung, and bronchus cancers. I want to take a moment to thank Texas Department of State Health Services for publishing this study. While the findings are not a surprise to those of us living in the shadow of contamination, they are a sad vindication for what far too many of us have experienced. The study area stretches from Atascocita to LaPorte and from North Shore to Mont Belvieu. This is an enormous swath of land, comparable to the island nation of Singapore. The findings affect a vast number of people. Environmental health risks tend to be widespread in areas that have high levels of pollutants or hazardous substances. When a family is suffering from health issues due to environmental factors, others in the community are likely experiencing similar effects. That's why this health assessment that we're discussing today is so important. They can help identify patterns of illness or cancer clusters that may indicate a broader environmental impact. Despite the limitations of this study, the findings are nothing short of startling. The environmental pollutants in our region are complex, from the industrialization of our river to historical waste sites. But one thing is clear, the residents who requested this study have lived, swam, boated, and fished for decades with their families, often unknowingly near or even on top of a hazardous waste site. The San Jacinto River Waste Pit Superfund site is still in our river to this day. Many of us who have spent over a decade fighting for our community may never live to see the benefits of our work. But we keep pushing forward because at the end of the day, we can't go back. We can continue to fight for a cleaner environment for the future generations because they will call this place home. This study represents years of behind-the-scenes work, collecting data, understanding community concerns, supporting local voices, and advocating on your behalf. We couldn't have championed this without the local knowledge. But our bodies are toxic soup, and we cannot ignore that any longer. The water, the air, the soil, and the seafood in our community are contaminated, and it should not be acceptable that our communities live with disproportionately high rates of cancer. It's time for our state and our federal government to start acting. We will meet in the coming days with Texas Department of State Health Services and discuss with them some of the items omitted from this study and find out what their plan of action is based on the findings that we do have. For the EPA, we are calling on you to uphold the promise you made to our community after Hurricane Harvey and get the pit out of our river. We simply can't afford to wait any longer. Now I would like to introduce Gene Hennigan, a longtime resident of Lynchburg.
Thank you, Jackie. First of all, I'd like to thank Commissioner Ramsey for allowing me to kind of say a few words. Okay. My name's Gene Hennigan, as Jackie said. I've been a long-time resident of Lynchburg since 1977. Shortly after marrying my wife, Patty Nally, who's been in Lynchburg since 1953 when she was born. Our roots are here. We raised our two sons here. They grew up here. My youngest son still lives next door to me, along with my 4 grandchildren who are growing up here. You can say our roots are pretty deep, so this land is very important to us. I'm a former owner of the Automation Group, a world-class engineering company, and I've executed projects from Hawaii to Kuwait. I was a certified project manager. I've managed projects and multiple contractors and multiple clients. I've written scopes of work, developed multi-level schedules, written OSHA and Cal OSHA safety manuals. I know a little bit about how to complete a project. After several meetings now, I've asked some simple questions. Where's the schedule and who's the project manager? No one, including the EPA, can answer those questions. That's ridiculous. I don't know how you can even finish a project without a project manager or schedule. And I found out earlier, this man was a civil engineer, so he should know what I'm talking about. The project manager's job is to guide the project to completion on time and budget. Throwing some dates on documents that changed as often as they needed to delay the process is not a schedule. And that's all we've been seeing. The responsible parties say, we'll do this, we'll do that, but nobody's doing anything. They just keep, using that as an excuse not to get things done. And the only thing being accomplished is to make a lot of lawyers more wealthy, because they have no desire to complete anything at the $400 or $500 an hour they charge. All the people, including the responsible parties, the EPA, and the many lawyers involved have done is talk, while the people in our community are dying. I personally know this because my son, Jeff, who played and swam in these waters, he fished as a kid and has died from 2 kinds of lung cancer. My wife has had breast cancer. My youngest son, his father-in-law passed away 2 weeks ago from cancer. These are people that live around me. The list goes on, my friends. THEA has a whole wall of memorials just like ours. We're not special. We know the area is a cancer cluster due to the waste bits by experience, not by a study that was done. We've known it for a long time. Our number's 2533 over on that map. It's blood red. The responsible parties keep throwing out lame plans for cleanup to stall the process. They know they will not be accepted. They're just stalling and playing us and the EPA like a fiddle. As a project manager, you should look at a similar project and develop a plan that has worked in the past and adapt it to the new challenges of the current project. They don't want a plan because then they would actually have to do something. I've seen refineries built in less time than these people have just talked about this project. It's just a small hole in the ground, 100 feet in size. I realize the process to clean it up takes time, but you have to start before you can finish. From a cost standpoint, I would have fired all those lawyers by now. I don't think they've thought about the fact that eventually they're going to have to do this. And the cost of the project's probably going to be 10 times higher at this point than it would have been the 4 or 5 years ago, even though this has been going on a lot longer than that they were told they were going to have to do something. Not to mention, it could have been completed by now, and we wouldn't be talking about it anymore. I'm pleading with the EPA to put their foot down on the responsible parties, develop a schedule for completion with milestones, have severe penalties for not meeting those milestones, and watch them get this done before we lose another 100 lives. I really hope the EPA takes over the management if necessary to make this happen. The new U.S. Environmental Protection Agency Administrator Lee Zeldin has commented he wants to cut out regulations and stop progress, but solve environmental problems like ours. He said the first pillar of our new plan is pushing clean air, land, and water for every American. It's the EPA's responsibility to protect us, and they're just not doing it. Well, Lee, here's your chance to show people you mean it. You can stay at my house and drink some of my water. I'd like to thank everybody for this opportunity to share my story, which is one of hundreds just like me. I just noticed my daughter-in-law's cousin over in the audience. She's had cancer too. Like I said, it's time to stop talking and do this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hennigan. For someone to take time and tell their story is a big deal. People should listen. They don't tell that story because they don't have anything else to do. They tell their story because it's relevant and it's pertinent. Thank you, Jackie and THEA, for your unrelenting persistence in being sure that the story of the East Side, the, I would call, atrocity on the East Side, that story is told. I've been doing engineering for over 40 years. We've known about the waste pits, the San Jacinto waste pits. It's historic in terms of what people know. We've known it's here. And yet we sit here and let people come up with plans to remediate. Well, I can tell you, Mr. Hennigan, those attorneys got paid to do exactly what those attorneys did. Delay, delay, delay. Because you know what happens when you delay? The Superfund site gets washed down the bay. A significant portion of the Superfund site is gone. It's already been washed into probably the most important environmental fishing area that you could ever have. The Bay of Galveston is a huge deal. If you had to have a Superfund site anywhere in the world, this is the worst possible place to have a Superfund site. And as far as these responsible parties, they are who I would call irresponsible parties. And I'll tell you their name: Waste Management, International Paper. It's not like they don't have assets. If Waste Management has enough money to go sponsor a golf tournament, then I think they would have enough money to go clean up our waste pits on the East Side. It's time that they do it. They have delayed it way too long. We had a commitment over 5 years ago that, okay, we're not going to cap it, which, believe me, capping the waste pits, that is about the dumbest thing you could ever imagine. There's examples of what they consider a cap over on that table, and it's really kind of sad that anybody would listen to it. But finally, over 4.5 years ago, they were told to not cap it, remove it, and remove it now. And here we sit. Well, I agree with Mr. Hennigan. We're going to hold the new administration to account. They have a new Region 6 administrator that we look forward to having conversations with. I think the folks, the state folks who have come in and done their study, it's an incredible area that's impacted, but that's all truth. You know where the city of Houston gets their water? You have any idea where the city of Houston gets its water? Lake Houston. Where's Lake Houston? Just to the north of us. They just built a $2 billion surface water plant on Lake Houston, taking the water that they've just done a cancer study out of. And if I am exaggerating, so be it. But they've done a study in an area where we get our water. Most of the water comes out of the Trinity River, but it's pumped through canals that run through the east side of Harris County. So it's time to clean it up. And by the way, TxDOT is about to do a necessary improvement of I-10. Every time there's a hurricane, there's problems with the bridge over the San Jacinto River. The other problem is we need to get the barges out of the north side of the bridge. Because the bridge will continue to be hit by barges during a hurricane. I can tell you that because my precinct is the most impacted in any kind of a storm. Most of the water that comes into Harris County ends up where? In the San Jacinto River. So we know all these facts. It's compelling. There is 100 reasons why we need to do this, not in a, okay, when you can get around to it. We need it done urgently. They cannot build a new bridge over TxDOT until they get rid of these pits. So that's another pressure point. So we'll be pushing not only the barge issue, but the removal of these pits, working directly with the EPA. And if the EPA has to take it over, the EPA has to take it over. But it's time we quit letting lawyers decide on what we're going to do or not do. So I look forward to getting this cleaned up. We're not going to be quiet. We've been quiet far too long. And it's, as Mr. Hennigan says, people are dying because of our silence. If we start now, maybe we can protect our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren and the other people that, as this area develops, and there's 18,000 homes planned on the east side of Lake Houston in the next 10 years. We owe it to all those future people that will be moving to East Harris County and get it cleaned up. So it is compelling, and look forward to working with THEA and others and trying to make this happen.
Yes. So this report is not an update to Texas Department of State Health Services 2015 study. It's an addition. And so this looked at the years cancer rates from 2013 to 2021. And we added a couple of additional cancer types in this study because area residents let us know that they were concerned about additional cancer types that weren't previously studied. Another difference is that this study was one that looked at this area as a whole, whereas the other study, which you can see the findings for in the map over there, that study looked at the area as a whole, which is 65 census tracts, about 250 square miles. But that study broke it out per census tract so that you could look at smaller geographic zones. This one strictly looked at the area as a whole. Yes. Sure. So I actually received a call this morning from the Director of Epidemiology with Texas Department of State Health Services, and we will be meeting tomorrow morning to talk about some of the components of the study that we believe were omitted. And, the state worked with us on this. We agreed upon the terms of this study, so we will be having that conversation. And in the earlier conversations, we discussed how important public outreach was, and that we agreed that we should work together on that. And so I hope that moving forward, that the state will come here, that the health department will come here and talk to the residents and answer questions. We also plan to have some larger meetings and smaller meetings with area residents to hear, what is it that you want? We need to hear now that the community knows this information. Is it, help with early detection? What is it that can be done possibly to help the communities here? And then for the EPA, as Commissioner Ramsey mentioned, we certainly will be looking to meet with the new region administrator and the new administrator. And I have a call scheduled later this week with EPA headquarters. And, the previous Trump administration had a big precedence on Superfund sites, and they actually implemented the Superfund task force, where a group of EPA folks went around the nation and they saw every single Superfund site. That was the first time that a regional administrator ever put their boots on our site here. And some of those folks are back in DC at EPA headquarters. So we'll be talking with them and seeing where they'll go from here. Yes. Thank you. Yes. Sure. So the former study data stopped in, I believe, 2012 or 2011. So residents really wanted to see an update since the data was concluded for that study. And then, the residents really were wanting an update, saying, what are the rates like now? The population has grown, plus new cancers. People would say, my child has this type of cancer. Was it studied? And so that's really what prompted that. And then in terms of the two components, that one is breaking out the study area by census tract. This is 65 census tracts. This is a massive geographic area. And if you want to downplay a situation, you dilute it. And that's what we get here. If you look at the last study that was done, when it was presented as a whole, there were a few types of cancer at abnormally high rates. If you looked per geographic census tract, then you saw 8 or 9 specific cancers, almost double the amount of cancers at abnormally high rates. Aside from that, we asked Texas Department of State Health Services to study 7 specific types of childhood cancer that our residents are truly and really concerned about for their children that have battled these cancers. And the state only gave us data for 3 of those 7 types, and that's deeply concerning to us. The state has discretion on that data and whether or not they give it to us, because there were few cases, but just because there are few cases doesn't mean that it's not abnormal. So we're going to keep pushing for that data. We expected this study to be released, and we were told by the state that it was going to be released in late summer of 2024. Then it moved to executive review, and it sat in executive review until February of 2025. I believe we didn't receive exactly what we asked for. The state does, so we have more to work out. Sure. The state has a fair amount of discretion in these studies, and they are legally correct to lean on that discretion. But if you look at how they have handled cancer, how they put those policies into practice, the last study they broke out per census tract and gave us all the data despite few cases. And in the studies around Fifth Ward and Kashmir Gardens, they broke it out by census tract and gave sensitive data points. It can be done. It has to be done carefully and delicately in the way it's handled. So from what we're observing, there is an inconsistency here, and I don't know why, for sure. We're frustrated that the EPA hasn't taken stronger actions to require that this site is cleaned up. They have the legal authority and we need them to use it. The companies have continued to delay, continued to stall, produce insufficient plans time and time again for years. But at the end of the day, EPA has authority over the San Jacinto River Waste Pit Superfund site. They can get it cleaned up. They just have to take that step. Yes.
Well, I think it's everybody needs to get the message. I think the state needs to get the message. This is urgent. The plan that Jackie refers to by the irresponsible parties, they have a plan there. But I think, is it 7 years? Is it? So the plan, that's unacceptable. We don't need to take 7 years. Again, the longer they delay, the higher chance there is a lot of that waste will be washed down the San Jacinto River. So the pressure point right now is to get the EPA to tell the irresponsible parties to get out here and clean it up and do it. They could do it in a couple of years. They don't need to do it in 5 years. Get the waste pit up. And by the way, that needs to be done before they can rebuild I-10. Well, that's in some stage of design now. So there are a lot of things, a lot of moving parts. Obviously, the health of the region is primary, but you start with going and do what you already know that's there, that has been studied for decades. They've defined, they know what the problem is. All they're doing now is delay, delay, delay. And I think that needs to be the communication to the public. I think it's just one of the most irresponsible things I've ever heard of in my life, that we just sit here and we let these parties get away with it. Why do we do that? That should be on the front page of the newspaper, that they are not doing what they should be doing, what the EPA told them to do. They've been directed to do this. They need to. So we'll be pushing the EPA, but anything we can do from a public standpoint to clearly identify, it's not like we don't know what to do. It's not like this is like landing on Mars. This isn't complicated. Remove the waste from the river. It's in the middle of the river. Remove the waste from the middle of the river. And I want to thank Congressman Crenshaw's office as well, Congressman Babin. They too have been in Washington with the EPA, and they get to see them on a regular basis. And I know they are, and they'll continue to push that.
Yes. So the 2027 date given was an estimate based on the amount of time it would take, assuming that this latest plan is accepted, put out for bid, and then implemented. It's in our opinion that it's not biddable, that it's not a complete plan at this time. So the EPA, that's why they gave that estimate. Additionally, I can't speculate though on that, they're doing it at the same time. I can't speculate on that. But TxDOT's project has continued to be pushed back over the years, but they said at that EPA meeting that the lead date is timeline is in 2027. So it's terrible timing. It's a really bad situation, and the agency has the job of figuring out how to move this forward. The best possible choice of a really terrible situation, and no ideal option, to be honest. All right. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you.